I'm so upset. Oh my God.
Let's see how Earth responds to that.
Welcome to TYT. I'm your host, Anna Kasparian, and we've got a jam-packed show, as always, right ahead for you all. My team has been working around the clock to make sure we have the best stories, the most important stories to share with you. And we even have 2 interviews scheduled for today's program. One features Wally Rashid, who has been on the show before to give us an update on what is taking place in the West Bank. If you can recall, and if you happen to watch the previous interview I did with him, he does have family members there. And well, there was an incident that took place days ago that is now allowing in the minds of the Israelis to carry out more destruction, more pain, and more suffering against the Palestinian people in the West Bank. So we'll talk about that. Trita Parsi, the executive VP of the Quincy Institute, will be coming on to discuss, well, the first story I'm gonna cover in today's rundown, and that is the fact that Ukraine has decided to strike an Iranian vessel in the Caspian Sea. I think that was a bad idea, but Trita's a bit of an expert on these types of matters, so I'll present the story and then later we'll bring him on to elaborate further on whether this was a smart move for the Ukrainians. Later in the show, we'll give you some updates on the Iranian war, and I want to be very clear about the fact that calling Trump taco is, I think, a really stupid thing to do when you want the war to end. Trump always chickens out, haha, let's mock him. How about we communicate strategically? That's not saying that I'm trying to defend Trump. In fact, I think Trump is a total moron for getting dragged into this war in the first place. I would just like the war to end. So if he actually reneges on carrying out some mass casualty event against the Iranians, instead of mocking him, maybe we should celebrate that. Maybe we should celebrate that. But anyway, we'll get to that story more later on in the show. And there's a huge story having to do with the Democratic Party and just how much debt the Democratic National Committee is in. But without further ado, I want to go to our very first story, what I just kind of previewed for you all, and it's this.
Tehran says 1 sailor was killed and another injured in the Ukrainian attack. Iran is accusing Kyiv of trying to expand a war beyond its borders. But Ukraine says it was targeting Russian vessels carrying Iran-linked military cargo.
According to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, Ukrainian forces struck Iranian vessels that were carrying military cargo between Russia and Iran in the Caspian Sea, an expanding front in this war.
Tehran's foreign minister saying, quote, Zelensky has attacked an Iranian commercial vessel, killing a sailor, a blatant UN charter violation done at Israel's behest to drag Europe into its war. In calls, we made it clear that what the freeloader in Kyiv did cannot go unanswered.
Mere days after Israel's bitch, Laura Loomer, visited Ukraine for a pro-Ukraine, anti-Russia propaganda trip, well, an Iranian sailor was, as you just heard, killed by an Iranian strike on what appears to now be an Iranian vessel that was in the Caspian Sea. It was not a Russian vessel headed for Iran. It was an Iranian vessel, apparently headed to Russia. Now, the attack is fueling, and it should fuel fears that the war in the Middle East could expand into what increasingly looks like World War III. So you vote for the guy who claims that he wants to prevent wars, to avoid starting new wars, and we are barreling toward World War III. In fact, I would venture to say we are already in World War III. So why would Ukraine do this? Ukraine, which has struggled to maintain its own territory in the war against Russia. Ukraine, which is fully funded, or at least this war is fully funded by the EU, but mostly the United States providing weaponry for it to fight its wars. Is Ukraine unaware that we are running out of missile interceptors? That we're running low on missiles, period? Why would you potentially begin a new theater of war as a country that is heavily reliant on the United States for weapons that we are quickly running out of? Stupid. I think that this was a stupid move, to say the least. Now, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said that his country's forces achieved very strong results with long-range strikes in the Caspian Sea, including vessels used in military cargo shipments involving Iran, as well as a warship. You killed an Iranian sailor. That's what you refer to as very strong results? Now, Zelensky is trying to ingratiate himself, of course, with Donald Trump as the United States gets its ass handed to them by the Iranians in this devastating war that the US is attempting to fight on behalf of a foreign country, and that's Israel, of course. Now, Zelensky thinks that it made sense to attack the Iranian ship because Tehran allegedly supplies Russia with missiles it uses against Ukraine. So why now then? If that is his argument, why now? This war began in 2022. Why did you decide to wait, 4.5 years, 5 years? 4.5 years to go after Iran now? Is it because you are trying to ingratiate yourself with Donald Trump in an effort to get more weapons that the United States doesn't have? We don't have those weapons. That is precisely the reason why President Donald Trump didn't make good on his promise of carrying out some mass casualty event against the Iranians. The war against Iran has been paused for a few days now. And is it because Trump's a good guy and he realizes the war is stupid? No. It's because we are dealing with a situation in which our missile interceptors have been depleted. The missiles for any offensive operations have been depleted. We don't have the capacity or capability to continue the war against Iran, at least for now. So why would Zelensky be stupid enough to think that if he attacks Iran by striking one of their ships in the Caspian Sea, it's going to somehow increase the likelihood that the United States is going to provide more weaponry that we do not have? And of course, Iran has said that they will retaliate. And keep in mind that at this current moment, Ukraine does not have the capability to shoot down Iran's missiles, ballistic missiles. This guy, Zelensky is playing with the lives of Ukrainians, and he's been doing it for a while now. But this move is particularly stupid. So here's a real question. So Zelensky is making the argument that this was totally justified because this vessel was sending weapons to Russia. Now, is that true? Iran says no. Take a look.
The Caspian Sea, of course, has been used to connect Iran and Russia for a long time, trading across it. And what Iran is saying about this incident, they're saying that a ship that was coming from Astrakhan at the northern end of the Caspian Sea was traveling, carrying steel to Iran. Anzali was the port, Bandar Anzali at the southern end of the Caspian Sea, about 600 miles away, about 1,000 kilometers. And that's what the Iranians say was struck, a vessel simply coming from Russia to them carrying raw steel, and one person was killed and 3 were injured. Now, President Zelensky in Ukraine, his understanding of their strike, a Ukraine strike, is different. He says that this was an Iranian ship, or a ship, bringing Iranian weapons to Russia.
Okay, so look, why don't we play devil's advocate? Iran says one thing, Ukraine says another. For the purposes of this discussion, just to do a critical thinking exercise, let's just assume for the purposes of this discussion that Iran was in fact sending weapons to Russia. And that fact alone in the mind of Zelensky is justification enough to attack the Iranian vessel. Okay, fine. I'm gonna accept that, again, for the purposes of this discussion. So does that now mean that Russia can be justified in attacking American vessels transporting weaponry to Ukraine? What about Poland? Does this mean that Russia can now start bombing the hell out of Poland, since Poland is a big supplier of weaponry to Ukraine? I mean, it seems like, the argument that Zelensky is making here totally breaks down once you start considering who arms who, where these various players get their weaponry from, okay? For instance, here's another pretty valuable question if you ask me, and I'm very curious what the audience thinks. So, as The Hill reported, Iran may also have used Chinese missiles and long-range early warning radar during the war, sources told NBC News in May. Experts also say Chinese satellites have provided Iran with enhanced targeting data. So is Ukraine gonna start attacking Chinese vessels? Where are you at, Zelensky? Are you gonna start a war with China? Now, China denies that they're supplying Iran with weapons. There is some indication that they are helping Iran with targeting data. Russia has actually come out and admitted that they do have a relationship with Iran and have been providing some intel to Russia. But okay, even if you don't care about the Iranians at all or how stupid the Iran war is, take a step back and ask yourself, as someone who might actually really value the lives of Ukrainian civilians, was this a smart move by Zelensky? If you look at the full picture and understand our own limitations in helping the Ukrainians ward off Russia, because Russia, has pretty much taken over quite a bit of territory in Ukraine. With the use of drones, Ukraine has been able to do some damage to Russia, including its oil refineries, which pretty devastating for the global economy, but I'll take a step back from that. Ukraine is outnumbered when it comes to manpower, and Ukraine is in a lot of trouble when it comes to weapons stockpiles, much like the United States is. Iran, on the other hand, which has promised to retaliate, still maintains upward of 70% of its ballistic missiles. What Zelensky is doing here is not only playing with fire, he is risking the lives of Ukrainians in an effort to combine this war against Iran with the attempt to fight off or ward off Russia and Ukraine. And I'm not the only person who sees this for what it is. By the way, ask yourselves, right before Lindsey Graham died, he was in Ukraine. What were those meetings about? Did Senator Lindsey Graham convince Zelensky that it would be a great idea to go ahead and bomb Iranian vessels in the Caspian Sea? And I want to also let anyone who is sympathetic to the Ukrainians and the Ukrainian people understand something. It's really important for you guys to know this. Our government doesn't care about you at all. This is a proxy war. So the US involvement in this war simply has to do with the fact that our government wants to weaken Russia and they're using you to do it. That is the truth. Trita Parsi weighed in on this, and he suspects that this does have to do with Ukraine wanting more weapons from the United States. He says that Ukraine is not trying to just enter the war with Iran. Rather, it appears it is trying to merge the Ukraine war with the Iran war. Why? Because if these two wars merge, Ukraine will be a belligerent in the Iran war and America will be a belligerent in the Ukraine war. That is, the US will no longer just be arming Ukraine, but also actively and openly fighting Russia with US personnel. Let that sink in. That is the key objective Zelensky has tried to achieve since 2022. And to get some clarity on that statement, because I think there's a lot of truth to it, we will be having Trita Parsi on later on today in the hour to discuss his views and where we go from here. Because an escalating, expanding war is not a great thing, especially for the United States, especially for our military, when you take a look at the depletion of our weapons inventory. Sagar and Jetty from Breaking Points also did a really good job explaining the other way in which the Iran war is getting linked to the Ukraine war. Take a look.
They desperately want those Russia sanctions passed, and Trump has given them the greatest gift of all by linking the Iran and Russia sanctions together, which provide secondary sanctions, and effectively wipe foreign trade with Russia off the map, which is, the ultimate economic nuke, I guess, if you were going to call it. Trump never even wanted to do it previously because he knew if I do this, there's no negotiations that are potential with the Kremlin. That's what these two things are about. Not to even mention the belligerent behavior of Ukraine. Like, I'm sorry, you can support Ukraine and all and that if you want, even striking deep into Russia, which I think is nuts, but okay, because they're a nuclear armed power. Here, you're directly inserting yourself into the Iranian conflict in a desperate bid to ingratiate yourself with the neocons of Washington. And by the way, you have your own war to be fighting, which is with Russia. So what are you doing here if not trying to play the game, insert yourself in the neocons, good graces, and now inviting potential Iranian response? What is America going to do? Are we going to shoot down now Iranian, missiles coming into Kiev? I mean, the entire thing would be insane.
Yeah, the entire thing would be insane. And in fact, what we're dealing with right now already is insane. And by the way, something that Crystal Ball mentioned in that segment that I have been reading about in recent days and have been wanting to share with you, so this is a perfect opportunity to do so. It has to do with yet another way in which Zelensky is trying to kind of merge these two wars together. So one of the things that he's been doing is he's been reaching out to our Gulf allies. And as many of you are aware, it has been incredibly difficult for the United States to defend our Gulf allies because what have I been repeating over and over again since almost the beginning of this war against Iran? We are low on interceptors, okay? We are low on interceptors, partly because of the weapons that we've provided to Ukraine, partly because of the weapons we've provided to Israel to commit genocide and ethnic cleansing. So forget about US national security, right? Who cares about that? But to know that we are low on interceptors and to try to expand this war or to merge two wars is absolutely insane. So look, we haven't been able to defend our Gulf allies. So as a result, what's happening is Zelensky is reaching out to these Gulf allies and letting them know, hey, look, those Shahed missiles that you guys have been dealing with when Iran retaliates against US strikes? We've been dealing with them ourselves. Russia's been using the same missiles, and we've had some success with drone warfare. So maybe we can have some sort of cooperative agreement in which we can, merge as allies ourselves in this fight against Iran. So Crystal said something, she worded it so well. I don't have it verbatim, but effectively she said, we'll be using the Ukrainian population in a proxy war against Russia. And the Gulf, thanks to Zelensky, would be using Ukraine for its proxy war against Iran. Okay, that's what's going on here. And the United States and NATO might have also encouraged Ukraine to carry out this strike over the weekend. I mean, look, I don't know about NATO per se, but I certainly do find Senator Graham's visit to Ukraine highly suspicious. I find Laura Loomer's weird visit to Ukraine also deeply, deeply suspicious. I mean, she went from calling Zelensky like a Nazi essentially to going over there, getting on her knees and begging for forgiveness. Oh, I was so wrong about you. Why did you change your mind like this? What happened to give you this? I mean, what new information were you provided that would lead you to do a total 180 on Ukraine? So we don't know entirely what motivated or whether there were Western influences motivating Zelensky's decision to do this. But when it comes to Trump, what's really, really fascinating is if you've been paying close attention, he actually has been downplaying Russia and China's involvement in helping Iran. If you don't believe me, I'm gonna give you the receipts right now. So after Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth told lawmakers that Russia and China are enabling Iran, President Trump posted this on Truth Social. He said, President Xi, at our recent meeting in Beijing, China, told me that he would not, under any circumstances, give or sell weapons to the Islamic Republic of Iran. And that statement included Chinese companies. President Putin told me that he would not sell weapons to Iran. Therefore, two major countries that people speak of often in terms of Iran are, in my opinion, not participating. If they did, it would be very bad for them. Certainly not in their best interests. Fascinating. And look, Trump's a liar, of course. I mean, he's a more overt and brazen liar. He says things and literally an hour later, he'll say something entirely different. Sometimes he'll say something entirely different in the context of the same speech. But Marco Rubio was a little more sophisticated in his lies. In this case, though, Marco Rubio pushed back on reporters asking if he had raised during his meeting with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov the issue of Russia allegedly sharing intelligence with Iran. And he says, "Who says they are?" He asked twice and suggested that Pete Hegseth was not specific in his accusations. I think Hegseth, as embarrassing as he is, was incredibly specific in his accusations against Russia and China as he was testifying before the Senate Appropriations Committee last week. But nonetheless, keep in mind that Iran, again, has ballistic missiles that Ukraine does not have the capability to shoot down or intercept. So what Zelensky did is risking the lives of Ukrainians. Iran promises to retaliate against Ukraine for attacking them, but Ukraine is in desperate need for the United States to provide them with PAC-2 missiles, PAC-3 missiles, Patriot interceptors, the very things that we're low on. Iranian forces have already suffered 525,000 to 625,000 casualties, and that includes 125,000 to 150 deaths. Because remember, casualties means those wounded and those killed. So 125,000 to 150,000 deaths. Now, it's really hard to pin down a death toll or casualty numbers, but this is according to a study that was done by the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington. And I give you that information because if you have continued to pay attention to the war in Ukraine, you'll notice that the Ukrainian government has been like kidnapping people off the streets and forcing them into fighting this war against Russia. And many of them know we're gonna get killed. The Russians outnumber Ukrainians on the battlefield almost 3-1, and Russia has a larger population from which to replenish its ranks. So even though the study puts the number of Ukrainian troops lost on a smaller amount, Ukraine is losing a larger share of its smaller army. And by the way, what is the Ukrainian army? The Ukrainian army is full of conscripts. It's full of people who were Ukrainian civilians who were forced into fighting this war against Russia. More than 400,000 Russians are believed to be facing about 250,000 Ukrainians on the front line, military analysts say. What Zelensky did was deeply irresponsible and stupid. And really, there's nothing else to say about that. Hopefully, this doesn't expand into a war that involves Ukraine. They should not try to merge these two wars. But Zelensky, especially in recent months, has really been showing us who he really is, and it's not good. We got to take a quick break. When we come back, I'll give you an update on the war against Iran and more. Don't miss it.
Merge.
Thank you to everyone who has become a member. That includes all of our new members. Woman Child is one of them. Kath Ahora, I think your name is. Thank you. I hope you enjoy the benefits of becoming a member. We will be having a members only episode today where we're going to discuss Naftali Bennett, who is seeking the prime minister role in Israel. He wants to start a war with yet another country. So I'll tell you who for our members in the bonus episode, tyt.com/join to become one. David VC says, Anna, why now? Because Ukraine drone technology has reached a point where now Ukraine actually can attack ships so far away. Look at what Ukraine is doing in the Black Sea and the Sea of Azov. It's a bit ridiculous that you think Zelensky is stupid. Well, okay, do you want to compare Ukraine's military capability with Iran's? Because if Ukraine wants to now enter a war against Iran, they're for a lot of trouble. Just because you have the capability to use drones doesn't mean you should. I have the capacity to walk up to someone I disagree with deeply on a political issue and punch them in the face. Just because I have that capacity doesn't mean it's smart to do it. Where are they going to get the missile interceptors from? What are they going to do when Iran starts using ballistic missiles against them? I mean, if you can answer that question effectively, then okay, fine, I'll accept it. But if you can't, then yeah, what Zelensky did was stupid and irresponsible. Jack C 380 says, when does the strategic oil reserves hit critical mass? Are there any tankers getting out so far so we can get oil? I think maybe there might be some tankers, but the situation's dire. 2 weeks, that's what we have, 2 weeks. All right, everybody. Noble Mobile is one of our partners, and they have a new family plan option for those who are interested. So if your kids are looking at screens more than you would like them to, Noble Mobile will pay your family members to use their phones less. With Noble, you can reward your entire family by using their phones. You could reward your entire family by getting this service because they reward them for using their phones less. So for the monthly price of $40 a month, for each additional line, you each get up to $20 in cash back. Plus, you can create a family leaderboard to compare cash back and the brain rot index each month. Same great Noble coverage, unlimited data, half the cost of the big guys, plus cash back and international coverage and amazing customer service where you can talk to a real human being anytime for support. Just make the switch. Go to tyt.com/switch. All right, let's get to our next story.
NBC News is reporting the Pentagon is actually rationing some defense weaponry amid diminishing supplies. Is America backing away from a larger military attack because its military stockpile has been depleted?
I want to be crystal clear. The U.S. military, and I've verified this every which way, has everything that it needs to conduct this campaign as effectively as it needs to be. And I have to tell you, the people that are leaking this nonsense deserve to be in jail.
Well, that was the US ambassador to the United Nations, Mike Waltz, and he's a liar, a massive liar. And that's putting it lightly, because through his lies, he's putting our troops in danger. In fact, President Trump has now opted to take a pause in bombing Iran after 13 nights of pummeling the country. And it's not because Trump necessarily wants to end the war. It's because he had to. So let me make the case, as some in the audience want to justify Ukraine entering a war against Iran, which still has 70% of its ballistic missiles intact. Ballistic missiles, which Ukraine doesn't have the capacity to shoot down. Anyway, top advisors and senior members of the administration met with Trump last week on Friday to basically discuss the fact that we're in a lot of trouble. The United States military is in a lot of trouble in this war against Iran because the Pentagon has depleted its stock of Patriot interceptors and other air defenses. So this has been a problem since the beginning of the war against Iran. This is not new information. It's just shocking to me that 5 months after Trump started this war, we finally have members of his administration bringing up the fact that we have depleted our missile interceptors. The New York Times reported that 3 US soldiers in Jordan were killed last Friday when a ballistic missile slipped through American air defenses, fending off a barrage of Iranian missiles and drones, a senior US official said. In fact, the Iran war casualty count has increased to over 600 US service members. So the Pentagon updated its war casualty database just this past weekend on Saturday, recording more than 140 service members who had been wounded in addition to the numbers we previously had. So the number we previously had was 482. When the new Pentagon data is combined with updated totals for Operation Epic Fury, 18 troops have died and another 624 have been wounded since the US launched its war against Iran on February 28th. How many IDF soldiers were killed in this war against Iran, which started on February 28th? Since, this is a war Israel wanted, and this is a war that the US has entered on Israel's behalf. Let me look at my notes. Zero, none, zero. Okay, so as a result of how badly the US is losing this war, General Dan Kane, who is the chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, warned Trump privately that resuming major combat operations against Iran was doable, but that it would dangerously deplete interceptors available to the military central command, which is responsible for operations in the Middle East. So how many interceptors do we have left? That's the real question. Apparently, the administration is putting out claims that we have about 1,000 interceptors left. But there are some CIA analysts who are saying the number's closer to 400. Larry Johnson is one of those former CIA analysts who put that data out. And he says that it's publicly available data. So I don't know why the government lies to us when we can actually see what's really going on here. So obviously, continuing the war when we don't have the means to defend US service members in the region would be a dumb move. One senior US official who also spoke on the condition of anonymity expressed doubts that resuming major combat operations would drive Iran back to the bargaining table. The official said the strikes have the opposite effect of what is intended, keeping Iran cohesive and allowing Iranian leaders to focus attention on an external threat. That has also been true since the very beginning of this war. It was very obvious. What the war has done is it has created this rally around the flag effect in Iran. And in fact, we all witnessed that as the funeral events were taking place in Iran after the former supreme leader was killed, assassinated by the United States and Israel. So, Ben Shapiro, on the other hand, clearly could not care less about the United States military, their capabilities, or how vulnerable our soldiers happen to be. What he would like to do is ensure that the media zip it up, do not report the truth. We want to lie to the American people, but more importantly, have our service members go to war without the appropriate military stockpiles necessary to fight a war effectively and to defend themselves. Don't believe me? Here's what he said. When you're leaking falsely, according to President Trump, let's just pause right there. Oh, Trump told you that we're all good? That we're not low on missile interceptors? Oh, okay. I mean, how often do you think Ben Shapiro, who loathes Donald Trump? He does. He loathes Donald Trump. Do you really think that he trusts anything that comes out of Trump's mouth? Or is he just, very conveniently choosing to pretend like in this case, Trump isn't a liar? Let's go back to it. When you're leaking falsely, according to President Trump, to CNN and the New York Times and Barack Ravid that we're short on interceptors, you're helping Iran. Trump must track down and fire the leaders in his administration, the leakers, I should say, the leakers in his administration who continue to undermine his pursuit of America's interests. He's such a weaselly little liar because obviously this war against Iran has nothing to do with US interests. It has depleted our weaponry. It has cost us already over $100 billion. Where's Israel? This is a war for Israel. Are they bankrolling this war? Of course not. Are they losing soldiers in this war? Of course not. Ben Shapiro just wants the war to continue. Service members getting killed be damned. He doesn't care. He doesn't care. And he would like the media to shut the F up about what the truth is. And while Shapiro excoriates, the few media outlets that report the truth and wants to go after the leakers because they're the real problem, right? Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, the internationally wanted war criminal, plans to put in work on Trump during his now 8th visit to the United States to visit him? Let's take a look at that.
I think when this regime is either toppled or it's sufficiently weakened that it knows it has to end its nuclear program and has to change its course. That's really what President Trump is trying to achieve, and I back his his efforts to do so. If he can do so without returning to intense military fighting, that's fine. Why not? But one way or the other, they have to end their nuclear program.
And you're getting set to travel to the U.S. to meet with President Trump and then attend the funeral services of Senator Lindsey Graham. Prime Minister, what can you tell us about any fresh new intelligence that you may have about that nuclear program that you are about to present President Trump with?
Our intel services and yours are working so close together that it's not that I'm going to present new information, but I think it's a good thing to have the opportunity to sit with our good friend President Trump and to hear what he has in mind, because I think in many ways it's his decision.
I think in many ways, the country that's a big threat to world peace and to the safety of us all is Israel, which actually does have clandestine nuclear weapons and has threatened to use them in different contexts in different points in time. And I just don't think a country that isn't part of the non-proliferation treaty, that refuses to acknowledge its nuclear arsenal, that stole our nuclear secrets and enriched uranium. Ben Shapiro would know a thing or two about that, right, Benny boy? You would know a thing or two about that, Ben. Yeah. Okay, that country is a threat. So it's rich to hear from an internationally wanted war criminal like Netanyahu about which countries can and can't have nuclear weapons. So it's very likely that Netanyahu intends to convince Trump that his original plan to escalate the war against Iran, against Iran was the right decision to make, even as the war-related chaos spreads to the Red Sea, with the Houthis basically fighting off the transit of Saudi vessels, and now the Caspian Sea, with Ukraine now attacking Iranian vessels, which apparently there's a portion of our audience that thinks is totally fantastic. We'll see how fantastic it is if Ukraine decides, no, we're gonna go to war with Iran. How are they gonna fight Iran and Russia at the same time? And are they planning on the United States backing them to help them win those wars when we haven't been able to win in this war against Iran? This is so unbelievably stupid. But okay, let me keep going. Before Trump decided to take a pause in the bombings, he seemed to be leaning toward approving an initial phase of a multi-stage bombing campaign. The campaign would counter coastal radars, anti-ship missile launchers, and a fleet of small Iranian attack boats and other sites that the Pentagon says have contributed to attacks on commercial ships transiting the strait. I just want to be clear about something. While Netanyahu's still talking about like, we must topple the regime, like Trump is so past that because it's not gonna happen. At this point, Trump is just fighting to get back to where we were before the war, where we were on February 27th when the Strait of Hormuz was open and free for all transit, without any tolls, without any safety or security concerns. Our decision to go to war with Iran on behalf of Israel has been devastating for the global economy and devastating when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz. So at this point, all Trump is trying to do, and what he's failing at, is to get the Strait of Hormuz open. And here's the thing, he's not gonna be able to do that through a military operation. There is no military option for that. We've been over this over and over again. The only thing that he can turn to is a negotiated agreement, but Trump is incapable of doing something like that because it would require him to admit to himself and to the American people that we lost this war. And it's not a reflection of our service members, it's a reflection of this administration, how corrupt our government is, and how corrupt our Pentagon is, really. So, the Pentagon also happened to rush more forces, weaponry, and supplies to the Middle East in recent days to prepare for any escalation. But now it looks like that escalation is on hold. And I'm not dumb enough to think that it's over. Trump realizes we've depleted our military assets, and as a result, maybe we should just call it a day and walk away. I think that this war will continue. And who knows what Trump has up his sleeve moving forward. But for now, it seems like he has been persuaded, rightfully, about how dangerous it is to continue the war and, in fact, to escalate this war against Iran, knowing what the depletion of our military assets really looks like. By the way, Trump was also planning to hit more civilian infrastructure, Iran's energy facilities, and Pickaxe Mountain. Can we maybe not strike energy facilities? I mean, if you're really concerned about the price of gas or the energy crisis right now, maybe don't strike any energy facilities, but he can't help himself. Last Thursday, the president told Axios, quote, "I am considering a massive attack, bigger than ever before. I am close to making a decision. We are all set for it." Now, he had a change of heart literally later that same day when his advisors told him that our dwindling stockpiles would make it impossible to defend our allies and our service members in the region when Iran inevitably retaliates, because that's what they've been doing, not just against the US and our military bases, but also against our Gulf allies, which host our military bases or allow for the United States to carry out strikes against Iran from their countries. Now, the reality of our depleted stockpiles was serious all the way back in April. Like, this isn't new information. Back in April, the New York Times reported that the Pentagon had used more than 1,200 Patriot interceptor missiles in the war at more than $4 million apiece, leaving inventories worrisomely low. Okay, so very, very low, according to internal Defense Department estimates and congressional officials. So I don't know why he didn't make a better decision all the way back in April when this information was already readily available to him. But Iran, again, still has or maintains 70% of their missiles. And the situation for the US has worsened since then, military officials said this week. Now, finally, just want to provide a word on the Hormuz Strait. I'm sorry, not the Hormuz Strait, my bad. The Red Sea blockade. This war has not played out well for the United States. It did not play out well for the global community. And not only are we dealing with the situation in which the Hormuz Strait is closed, we're also dealing with a situation in which Saudi vessels are dealing with a blockade carried out by Ansar Allah, otherwise known as the Houthis. But they have other tricks up their sleeves as well, because there's the Bab al-Mandeb Strait, and Ansar Allah is threatening to blockade that strait as well. So I think it would be best to maybe de-escalate tensions and find a way to get out of this war, pursue diplomacy, and more importantly, stop listening to the Israelis. That's critical. But something tells me that's not going to happen, especially with Netanyahu showing up for yet another visit in the Oval Office. When we come back, Trita Parsi will join us to discuss the Ukrainian attack on an Iranian vessel in the Caspian Sea. Don't miss it.
We've been on our phones too much. I feel like we just need to touch grass or something.
I told you. I mean, you know what? Let's actually do it. Let's touch the grass. Whoa. Andrew Yang? It's not racist, right? It's him.
Yes, it is I, Andrew Yang, out here giving money away as usual.
Wait, but literally?
Do you use a phone? Noble Mobile will cut your wireless bill in half every month, and you get paid even more if you log off, look up, and touch grass.
Oh, I actually have some grass if you...
I don't think that's the kind of grass.
Not that kind of grass, unfortunately.
Whoa, wait, what the...
Whoa. I guess that kind of grass works too. All grass works.
All grass and we get cash?
Wait, did you see that, babe?
Noble Mobile, make it rain, girl, make it rain, make it. That didn't rain so good, but now it's raining good.
Corruption, injustice, the system is rigged against you. Every day we're blasted by a flurry of terrible news from every angle, which can make it challenging to stay positive and know how to fight back. The Damage Report is your solution. I'm Johnny DeRola, and my daily morning show cuts through the noise and exposes the real damage being done to our country, the world, and how we can fight back against it. Corporate greed crushing workers? We'll name names. Politicians selling you out for their corporate overlords? We've got the receipts. Climate disaster, economic collapse, the rise of fascism. No spin, no establishment talking points, just the truth that you need to survive and resist. But it's not all doom and gloom. We'd love to have you join the Dragon Squad, our community of positive-minded activists who turn the day's news into positive action. With new episodes every weekday, listen to The Damage Report to get honest news, unflinching commentary, and daring coverage you won't find anywhere else. Listen to The Damage Report on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts, because understanding the damage is the first step to fixing it.
Welcome back to TYT. Anna Kasparian with you. Well, as we discussed at the top of the hour, Ukraine made the decision to attack an Iranian vessel in the Caspian Sea, with the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky arguing that it was a justified strike since Iran is essentially, in his words, providing Shahed drones to Russia for their war against Ukraine. Now, I believe that was a dumb move, to say the least, and here to discuss whether or not I'm correct, but more importantly, how this is all going to likely play out, is Trita Parsi, who is the executive VP of the Quincy Institute. Trita, I'm so grateful that you're here today because
thanks so much for having me.
It's a difficult story to cover because understandably, a lot of people, especially in our audience, are very sympathetic to Ukraine following Russia's invasion. However, I believe that if you genuinely care about the people of Ukraine, you would kind of game this out and realize it was a dumb move. But I'm just curious what your overall thoughts are, and then I'll ask you some more specific questions.
Sure. So first of all, I think we can all recognize that Russia's invasion of Ukraine was a violation of international law and an illegal move. That, however, does not mean that everything Ukraine does afterwards is justified or legitimate, or vice versa. In other conflicts. So I think we have to deal with all of them in their right context. And what is happening here potentially, I'm not, you may have seen my tweet. I said this appears to be more than just an effort to inflict a cost on the Iranians for supporting Russia through these drones. And I think it's also important to understand, if that becomes the new rule, that if one country is supporting another country by weapons, they can be attacked. And the United States is going to be attacked by a lot of different countries, mindful of the fact that we're providing so many weapons. Now, one can definitely say that the Iranians are in support of Russia and that is a wrong move from them, questionable, et cetera, et cetera. That's all fine. But for that to be a justification for attack is a different story. But now the Ukrainians have done this, and they've done it very openly, bragging about it. And the Iranians have threatened to respond in kind. And there's been a lot of speculation that this is a way for them to show their drone capabilities and use that in order to get Trump to become more helpful towards them, et cetera. I suspect that there may be something bigger going on here, because from the very outset of this conflict, understandably from Ukraine's perspective, there's been an effort to actually get the United States into the war with Russia directly. If you're Ukraine, you're a much smaller country, you're invaded by a nuclear weapon state. Yes, you will be welcoming support and weapons, but if you really could get your way, you would actually get the United States into the war and fight Russia, because that's going to have a much better chance of succeeding for your end. But from the US's perspective, even the Biden administration that was so supportive of Ukraine put forward some very clear red lines. No troops on the ground, no to this proposal of a no-fly zone, which would have forced the US to shoot down Russian planes. That would be a direct confrontation, providing F-16s, other things that could get this to escalate to the point in which the US would be at direct war with Russia. And Trump, of course, criticized him for this. But what I think that Ukrainians may be trying to do right now is to merge the Iran war with the Ukraine war. It's not just about showing capabilities or dangling some carrots to Trump. It's to merge the two wars, because if Ukraine becomes a belligerent in the Iran war, then it could also lead to the United States becoming a belligerent in the Russia war. And that would then achieve what the Ukrainians have tried to achieve since 2022, but no president has been willing to go that far. But Trump just happens to be in a very vulnerable position right now because he's stuck. His military attacks against Iran are not working. He doesn't have the patience for the diplomatic solutions. And this would enable a new front to be open, so that it's not just the southern part of Iran, but also the northern part of the country, which could potentially change the course of the war. So I think Trump will be susceptible to this. I think ultimately he will likely reject the proposal, but I think he will be tempted because he's really stuck in the Iran war and is desperately looking for some sort of a magical military solution.
So last week on Friday, earlier that day, Trump had threatened to escalate the war against Iran. And by the end of the day, he backed out, right? People are mocking him. Oh, it's taco. Trump always chickens out. I'm glad that he backed off, because it turns out he finally listened to a few members of his administration who might love the war against Iran, but are real about the limitations of the United States, considering the fact that we've been arming Israel, depleting our stockpiles in doing so, arming Ukraine, depleting our stockpiles in doing so. We are very low on missile interceptors, which is precisely the reason why Trump hasn't been bombing Iran over the last few days. And so I'm curious if Volodymyr Zelensky is aware that these are interceptors that take years to make. We don't have the capacity to rush that right now. We are so low that we had to back off the war against Iran. So if Zelensky decides to open this new front, is he genuinely under the impression that he would be provided the defense capabilities necessary to actually protect his own people against Iranian strikes?
I think his calculation may very well be that exactly because he's opening a new front against the Iranians, that will be a big help to the US. And as a result, his ability to make the case for getting those limited interceptors will be stronger. Because part of what happened in this Iran war, that a lot of the resources the US had actually given the Ukrainians, some of it was actually taken back and put into the hands of the Israelis. This already happened back in June 2025 when the Israelis started that war with Iran. So in some ways, there's also this competition amongst these countries that are seeking America's support to be able to make the best possible case of getting it. And if he's opening this new front with the Iranians, changing the geography in the war, the Iranians so far have been the one that have been in control of the geography of the war. They're the ones who have escalated horizontally, and by that really put the US on the defensive. And the US, in some bizarre way, did not calculate that this would be a very likely thing that the Iranians would do. But this would now turn the table on the Iranians by opening this northern front. And precisely because of that, he may calculate that he will be in the best possible position to make the case to the US that they need to get more support.
You know, last week in a Truth Social post following Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth's testimony before the Senate Appropriations Committee, Donald Trump shot down what Hegseth had to say about China and Iran assisting, China and Russia assisting Iran in this war that we're wrapped up in at this moment. He said, I talked to Putin and I take him at his word that Russia is not providing weaponry or any help to the Iranians. And it's interesting that on one hand, you have the president of the United States downplaying both China and Russia's role in this war against Iran. And then simultaneously, you see Zelensky trying to ingratiate himself with Trump by carrying out the strike against the Iranian vessel. And so is Trump just kind of playing a game here? Or do you think he genuinely trusts that Putin is not involving himself in this Iran war?
No, I think, and I don't know if I would say that he's playing a game, but if he were to admit that there's a likelihood or even confirmation that the Russians provided intelligence that led to the Iranians striking Jordan and killing American soldiers, then he will be faced with tremendous amount of pressure to retaliate. and end up in that type of a confrontation. And incidentally, Zelensky in that interview said that he had clear intelligence that showed that it was the Russians that had provided that. It lies in Zelensky's interest to get the US into that direct confrontation with Iran. To get with Russia, just as much as it lied in Israel's interest to get the US into that confrontation with Iran. So I think the fact that Trump is kind of being careful here is precisely because he doesn't want to trap himself. He doesn't want to corner himself and then be forced to take some sort of action that could be disastrous. But it's also probably because it's not entirely clear at this point whether that was the case. I see only three options. Either they got it from the Russians, got it from the Chinese, or got it from what the Iranians say is the case. And I don't know if we can trust that entirely, but they nevertheless say that it's actually intelligence that is coming from inside of Jordan itself. I would say that the Russian option here is probably the most plausible one.
So what I've been seeing a lot in the media, especially in recent months, is a lot of boastful commentary from analysts about Ukrainian gains and how their drone technology has been so effective. And it's almost as if like, oh, Ukraine's doing so well, they almost like don't even need the United States. Like that's kind of implied in some of the reporting, which, to be completely forthcoming with the audience, I personally don't believe. I know that they've carried out some strikes against Russia in their own territory. But let's say the US doesn't have the weapons that they can provide Ukraine to fight off both Russia and Iran, if it really does expand to a war involving Iran. Does Ukraine have its own, weapons development? Because I know that they've been working on that to fight off Iran and Russia at the same time.
No, I very much doubt that they have that at the end of the day. But also, Iran has limitations. It's been focusing on retaliations against GCC states in Jordan. It has not actually escalated towards Israel this time around. Imagine if all of these wars merge together and you have an all-out war in which the Iranians have to fight the US, all of these GCC states, Jordan, Israel, and Ukraine at the same time, or that the US will be involved in all of these different affairs. It would be an absolute disaster for all of them, in my view, at the end of the day. None of them have the resources in which they could say that all of this is going to end up working out fine. The Ukrainians have, because of the fact that they've been at war now for more than 4 years, they have been able to develop a lot of new technology, methodologies, etc. On the drone side in particular, they're probably cutting edge at this point. They're getting a tremendous amount of resources to be able to develop this. I mean, there is a cynical perspective here, is that Ukraine essentially has become this testing ground for a lot of different weapons, and that European and American companies are testing their new weaponry in Ukraine. And as a result, the Ukrainians have a lot of experience with all of this. But is it enough to be able to take on this? I think it's a very foolish step, because at the end of the day, yes, the Russians have not managed to defeat Ukraine, and it's a major victory for the Ukrainians. But at the end of the day, expanding the war only makes sense if you are confident that the resources the Iranians bring into the war will be far outmatched by the fact that the US would enter the war against Russia. That's how it would make sense for them. But that is a huge gamble.
It really is. It really is a huge gamble. And you're gambling, Zelensky in this case is gambling with the lives of, Ukrainian civilians who have been through a lot over the last, 4.5 years. Well, I know you have to go. Thank you so much for being generous.
Thanks
with your
so much
time,
for having
Trita.
me. Really appreciate it.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back for the second hour of the show, we have to talk about never before seen footage of the late Senator Lindsey Graham. Apparently, there was a filmmaker working on a documentary that included Lindsey. And man, that guy was just titillated over the thought of war. And we're going to show you when we come back. I don't care if you're Christian. In fact, I will fight for you to have your religious liberty and practice your Christianity. I believe in that. I don't believe in Christianity, which means that you do not get to dictate the way I live my life based on your religion. I don't care what the Bible says. You have every right in the world. All those women who identify with your religion have every right in the world to not get an abortion, to not take birth control, but they do not have the right to dictate my life and what I decide to do with my body. I don't care care about your goddamn religion. I'm so tired of having nonstop conversations about what the Bible says. You live your life in the way that you interpret the Bible. Again, I don't care, but you don't get to take the Bible and tell me, well, the Bible says this in this chapter in this verse. I don't care. I don't care. I don't believe in it, and I have the right, based on our Constitution, to not believe in it.
No part of Gaza has been left unscathed. Ain't a whole lot left. I don't know why they need any more bombs. Let us be clear. The United States provided $18 billion in military aid to Israel. Netanyahu, indiscriminate bombardment, have killed more than 50,000 civilians, 60% of whom are women, children, paramedics, and journalists. All of this is against basic human decency. You don't starve children with absolutely no humanitarian aid getting into Gaza. It is a war crime. It is illegal for the United States government to provide Israel with more offensive weapons. History will not forgive us.
We've been on our phones too much. I feel like we just need to touch grass or something.
I told you. I mean, you know what? Let's actually do it. Let's touch the grass. Whoa. Andrew Yang? It's not racist, right? It's him.
Yes, it is I, Andrew Yang, out here giving money away as usual.
Wait, but literally?
Do you use a phone? Noble Mobile will cut your wireless bill in half every month, and you get paid even more if you log off, look up, and touch grass.
Oh, I actually have some grass if you...
I don't think that's the kind of grass.
Not that kind of grass, unfortunately.
Whoa, wait, what the...
Whoa. I guess that kind of grass works too. All grass works.
All grass and we get cash?
Wait, did you see that, babe?
Noble Mobile, make it rain, girl, make it rain, make it. That didn't rain so good, but now it's raining good.
Corruption, injustice, the system is rigged against you. Every day we're blasted by a flurry of terrible news from every angle, which can make it challenging to stay positive and know how to fight back. The Damage Report is your solution. I'm Johnny DeRola, and my daily morning show cuts through the noise and exposes the real damage being done to our country, the world, and how we can fight back against it. Corporate greed crushing workers, we'll name names. Politicians selling you out for their corporate overlords, we've got the receipts. Climate disaster, economic collapse, the rise of fascism. No spin, no establishment talking points, just the truth that you need to survive and resist. But it's not all doom and gloom. We'd love to have you join the Dragon Squad, our community of positive-minded activists who turn the day's news into positive action. With new episodes every weekday, listen to The Damage Report to get honest news, unflinching commentary, and daring coverage you won't find anywhere else. Listen to The Damage Report on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts, because understanding the damage is the first step to fixing it.
Welcome back to TYT. Anna Kasparian with you. I just want to read one member comment before we move on to our next story, because this is actually a really great point that I wish I had thought of myself. But our member says, this is Wary Pirates, who says, Iran needs their weapons. They're not going to be sending them to Russia. At this moment, you're probably right. But I wouldn't doubt that Iran has supplied Russia with Shahed drones in the past, like after Russia invaded Ukraine. That's actually been reported pretty widely. I don't know if they've continued to do so after the US, struck and attacked Iran starting on February 28th. But that is a good point. Anyway, why don't we get to our next story? There's a lot to talk about here. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, along with his defense minister Israel Katz, have now announced that they will be escalating their war on the Palestinian people in the West Bank following an incident that took place days ago in which settlers tried to terrorize Palestinians in their own homes, and Palestinians decided to defend themselves, which apparently is a grave sin in the West Bank. They're just supposed to allow these terrorists to terrorize them, to steal their homes, to light their homes on fire as their children are sleeping in them. Let me give you the details. The Israelis are calling for forceful action in villages acting as terrorist hubs, including arms confiscation, revocation of work permits, and additional measures, reinforcement of units throughout Judea and Samaria, separation of traffic routes and checkpoints, and accelerating the legalization of farm outposts and establishments of new ones. So in other words, Israel plans to do what they had already been doing. They just intend to ramp things up even more. So now they're claiming that there was a terrorist attack that took place against Israelis. The real question is, what were Israelis doing in the West Bank to begin with? But of course, they feel entitled to any and all land, including land that stretches far past the West Bank. Let's be clear about that. The so-called terrorist attack they're referring to, by the way, took place days ago when armed Israeli settlers backed by the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, attacked the Palestinian village of Tal, which is near the city of Nablus. Now, Essam Saifi, who is a local leader in the Palestinian Fatah party from Tal, told Reuters the following. About 25 to 30 Israeli settlers initially attacked the eastern area of the town and tried to break into 2 houses there. The residents came out to confront them, and the settlers opened fire. In other words, the Palestinians defended themselves, but that always comes at a steep price. So half an hour later, the Israelis returned and attacked the western part of the town, striking a child with a weapon. This caused chaos, and the Israeli military arrived and started shooting along with the settlers, which is totally unsurprising. And I want you to take a look at this video, because this is the video the Israelis are using in order to justify their escalations of terrorism against the Palestinian people. What it shows is Israeli settlers advancing against and firing on a group of Palestinian residents in the area who were, again, attempting to defend themselves and their village from these settler terrorists. One Palestinian resident named Farouk Ramadan was able to take the gun from the settler and shoot him as he was firing on Palestinian civilians. The video shows a settler terrorist advancing on 2 civilians with his gun drawn and pushing them down with his gun when one grabs the gun and defends himself and other civilians in the crowd from the terrorist attack, the Israeli terrorist attack. And in the end, the death toll was, of course, heavier on the Palestinian side, with 4 Palestinians getting killed. There was 1 Israeli who was killed as well. Israeli settlers killed 4 Palestinian youths from the same family in the village of, I'm guessing, Tal, west of Nablus, as they tried to defend themselves, their village, and their homes. After the settlers attacked them with weapons, the settlers began shooting at them from close range. Now, luckily, we have an incredible person, a wonderful content creator that you may have come across, if not on social media, certainly on our show, because we've had him on before. We have Wally Rashid joining us now to give us some more details on this story. Wally, welcome. Thank you for taking the time to do this.
Hey, Anna, thanks so much for having me.
It's my pleasure. So you have family near where this incident took place. So tell me about what your family personally has been experiencing in the West Bank at the hands of these Israeli settlers. And then we'll talk more specifically about this particular incident.
Yeah, my family's village, it's called Burin. So it's like 10 minutes. It's on the other side of this mountain, or I guess this big hill that Tel is on. So it's just, they're right across from each other. And immediately when this happened, of course, the Israelis, they stated that these guys were hikers going on hikes. These are armed settlers going down and terrorizing Palestinians. And then they warp it to make the Palestinians look like terrorists. But the settlement next to my family, it's called Yitzhar. And it's one of the most violent settlements in the occupied West Bank. They do this thing called price tag attacks, where they'll basically terrorize Palestinians and scare them, and they do it to basically put them into submission. And these are, you know, a lot of these times when we talk about violent settlers, they're also called hilltop youth. These are like 13, 14-year-olds with rifles running around Palestinian towns. I remember when I visited my family in 2022, the first hour when I went to visit my family, all of a sudden these settlers come down, 13-year-olds, they'll put on like military uniform or IDF uniform, and they'll just start patrolling Palestinian villages as if they have any sort of authority to do that. And Palestinians, obviously, they run back into their homes because they know they can't get into any sort of confrontation. Again, the first hour, and I previously showed clips of my family's village when this happened on my YouTube, they came down and they just started setting fire to the entire hillside, the hillside of my family's village where there's olive trees. And then when the IDF comes, they'll stick an Israeli flag right on the ground and protect the settlers as the settlers terrorize the Palestinians. In my family's village, there was this house that was getting built. It was like, they were kind of a extended family, and they were building a house. They were building the house for maybe a year, and I guess the construction was halfway done. And it was on the hillside of my family's village, but apparently that upset the Israelis and the IDF. So the settlers would come down and they would start having lunch on the foundation of the house, and they just wouldn't allow them to build it anymore. Not because it's on land that it shouldn't be on, it's on Palestinian land, but they'll just terrorize them. And every day they'll come have lunch on the house. They'll just eat their sandwiches, do whatever, and the Palestinians can't do anything. So it's been like that for just a year. Every single day, Palestinians just basically have to be like in total submission to these people. And you know, people say, "Oh, why can't Palestinians defend themselves?" The whole village will be razed. The whole village is razed. If a Palestinian defends himself, they'll flatten the whole village. And Smotrich said the day that this happened in Tel, he stated that they're going to be uprooting all the terrorist villages around Tel, including my family's. So I immediately reached out to my uncle and I asked him what's going on. And they put like a curfew on the village, on Burin, on the village nearby, which is called Iraq Burin. And they basically said there's a curfew, and Smotrich is now calling to just basically raise them and just all the surrounding villages in Tel, and should just build a new settlement. They already put an outpost there. So immediately after this event happened, they stuck an outpost. So basically an outpost is like a trailer home or something. And they'll just stick it up, and they'll have like 2 settlers live in the trailer home. And they'll do this on basically every hillside you'll see where a Palestinian town is in the valley.
I just like, when is enough for these people? I don't understand it. I really don't. When is enough for these people? Okay, so let's talk about the incident involving the terrorist settlers aggressively assaulting innocent Palestinians in their own village, their own homes. I had watched a video of a settler lighting a home on fire as a child slept. It was in the middle of the night. A child was sleeping in their room. And they're just happy to burn children alive. And yet there is no discussion in the international community, okay? This loathsome international community, and I mean that with every fiber of my being. They are loathsome. No discussion about doing something as these individuals are being terrorized. West Bank had nothing to do with what happened on October 7th, doesn't matter. West Bank, in fact, the political leadership of the Palestinians in the West Bank has gone out of its way to be very deferential to the Israelis with the hope that maybe we can have friendlier relations and the people of Palestine will be left alone. Of course, that didn't happen. It didn't work. Nothing is ever good enough for the Israelis, because once they have their sights set on land that doesn't belong to them, it's over. But maybe I'm wrong, Wally. Like, please help me reverse a little bit of the blackpilling. Is there anyone in the global community that gives a damn about this and wants to do something about it? And I'm talking about governments. I'm not talking about ordinary people. Ordinary people typically don't have power, but I'm curious what you think.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Well, government-wise, I thought you were I thought you just meant collectively, because Dana Bash and Jake Tapper definitely aren't going to say anything about it on CNN either. Government-wise, no, honestly, not really. I mean, if it comes to any actual government official, you'll never hear them actually talk about what needs to happen. You'll hear them toss and parrot around this thing like, oh, they condemn settler violence, but I'm so sick of the word condemn. It's probably the most overused, ridiculous word. They don't go any further. And even today, it's just so irritating when we hear Democratic politicians talk about a two-state solution. What two-state solution? What are you going to do? I don't think they recognize what would have to happen in order to get these settlers out. There would have to be like full-on like war. These settlers would never leave. They have full-on rifles. How are you going to get these people to leave? They're not actually going to leave. The only thing I have at my disposal now, and last time I came on your show, we talked about how I'm working on settler sanctions, and that is something I'm actively doing, like freezing the assets of the settlers that terrorize Palestinians, freezing the assets of the settlement. It does help, it chokes them dry. And then previously, when we would freeze their assets, they would create GoFundMe accounts, and then we would freeze those GoFundMe accounts. And it helps. It actually helps because then they're at least a bit more cautious before terrorizing a Palestinian. So we would do that, but I mean, that's not going to get them to pull out of the West Bank. That's not going to get them to do anything. And now even the Israeli opposition doesn't even, like, they're already stating they'll never allow for Palestinians to have self-determination. They'll never allow to have them, live in their land, just having pure freedom. I just like my uncle, he's like 70 years old. And he just lives a simple life. Like he wakes up, he'll have a cigarette, he'll just, hang around the garden, and he just has such a simple life. And I remember whenever I visit him, like, he's such a pure soul. Mm-hmm. And it just makes me so mad that like he's just such a simple guy, and then you have these 13-year-old settlers come down and just terrorize him, and it's just like I hate that he has to. I just hate that he has to live through this. And I hate that the world just doesn't. They really try to downplay how bad it is over there. I'm Palestinian, but I'm pretty pale skinned, and I've never experienced, aside from my name being Walid Rashid, I've never experienced actual racism in the U.S. I'm pretty privileged in that sense. Maybe discrimination because of my name, but that's one thing. Mm-hmm. But Anna, when I visited my family in the West Bank, I can't explain to you, I've never been looked at like a cockroach the way these settlers will look at you. Like they looked at me. I've never been looked at like that. They'll look at you like you're subhuman filth, like actually a cockroach. They actually find enjoyment killing you. Like they'll post it. They'll take photos of dead Palestinians. They'll toss it on their Facebook groups. And they'll just like get genuinely happy. And it's just like they truly think you're just like vermin to exterminate. And you'll have these Israeli prime ministers like Smotrich and Ben-Gvir just like edging that on. How are you supposed to live with these people? They don't even think you're human. They don't even think you're human.
It's reminiscent of Nazi propaganda and the way Nazis treated the Jews during the Holocaust. In fact, they would refer to the Jews as cockroaches. So, I mean, it's crazy to see the way, Zionist Jews, and look, I don't even want to say Zionists at this point. They are Jewish supremacists. Let's just call them what they are. They are Jewish supremacists. The way that they behave is reminiscent of Nazi Germany. And we're supposed to defend that? We're supposed to support that? No, there's no way in hell I ever would. But I'm worried about innocent people getting killed, getting hurt. I'm worried about your family. And a question that always comes up in my mind, and this is a difficult question to even ask, because I know that if I found myself in a situation like this, I would want to fight. I wouldn't want to be driven out of my home, my land. But I am curious, has there been any point where your family thought this isn't worth it? We need to flee. We need to get out of here.
I mean, my family, like, I have cousins and everything. So I've had some cousins leave. And then I have some family that's there, and they're like, we will die here. Like they're just set. They're not going to leave their land, no matter how much you try to pressure them. I mean, for example, my uncle, he's in his 70s. He's like, I've already lived 70 years here. I'm going to die here, and they don't care. And I mean, I'm privileged to live in the United States now. I mean, I was born in the United States, so to live in the United States, but it makes me sad at the same time. And I'd never pressure them not to leave if they don't want to, but they really, I feel like they recognize that if they leave, like it's more than just about them. It kind of represents something more, and they recognize they're like, no, I'd rather die here. I'd rather die before I'm going to be kicked off of my land, and And you know, I think they're some of the strongest people. I get so scared. I mean, I like, especially after this attack happened, because it was literally on the other side of the hill. It was right there. And then Smotrich says they're going to be leveling all the surrounding villages, which is in my family's village. I just feel like every day I'm waking up, I'm like going on Facebook Messenger, wherever I talk to my family over there, and I'm just like, I don't know. Sometimes I just feel like they're next.
Yeah, and honestly, everything that's been going down in the West Bank kind of puts October 7th in a lot more perspective, because I'm always going to have a problem with targeting civilians, period. But when it comes to Hamas targeting Israeli military bases, the Palestinians don't have a right to defend themselves? Right?
No, you can't even talk about it. I mean, you probably saw, I think it was going viral, that interview with Ro Khanna, somebody from Dropsite News interviewed Ro Khanna.
Jeremy Scahill.
Yeah, exactly. And they asked him, and Ro Khanna, was kind of frozen. He just didn't want to go there, because the idea of even questioning a Palestinian having, the ability to defend themselves, you just can't even get anywhere near that conversation. It's like the idea of a Palestinian defending themselves is taboo. If you were sleeping at home and a settler comes in at 3 a.m. with a rifle to shoot your family, as a Palestinian, you have to be a good Palestinian and just raise your hands and die. That's what you have to do. Then a politician might feel bad for you. But if you're a Palestinian and you wake up at 3 a.m. to a settler terrorizing you and you decide to attack back, well, actually, you're a terrorist. But it's just like any other place in the world, somebody would be like, no, you have a total right to kill somebody that comes in your house at 3 a.m. getting ready to kill you anywhere else. But if you're a Palestinian, the only way you'll garner sympathy is if you're dead. Maybe then after you're dead, then people will start to feel bad for you. Then people will be like, oh, it's okay. Politicians would rather have a dead Palestinian than one that defends themselves.
No, you're totally right about that. And it's disgusting. It's absolutely disgusting. Final question for you, because I am curious. Seeing the terror that Palestinians are dealing with at the hands of Israeli settlers in the West Bank actually increased my support for the Second Amendment. I was never in favor of banning guns, and like Jake and I would have debates about that. But now I'm more, confident in my resolve. Like I think it's important for people to have the right to and the means to defend themselves. And I don't trust our government to keep us safe. And so I just think it's really made me see the right to bear arms in a different light. That's not to say there are no downsides, but I think the upsides significantly outweigh the downsides. I'm curious what you think.
Yeah, I know. I mean, we're pretty privileged. We're not living there, or living in a situation like that where you actually wake up like worried for your life to that degree every single day, where you have people that are running down with weapons, like getting ready to kill you every single day. It's crazy, because in what other planet or what other place on earth could you have these people that are fully armed, and you have another group of people that they hate so much that they view as vermin that are totally defenseless. They can't do anything. And then on top of that, you have synagogues in New York City fundraising money for thermal imaging drones and rifles, and they're sending it over there, and it's totally legal. Like, it goes through the wire transfers goes through. They send the money. It's totally okay. There's an organization now called American Friends of Judea and Samaria, and they're lobbying politicians, and they've been fundraising money for bulldozers, and they're sending it over. And Palestinians can't do anything. They can't defend themselves, nothing. So no, I'm very pro Second Amendment now. Absolutely. I mean, I hope that we'll never have to experience anything like that here in the United States, but I also don't, like you said, I don't trust our government. I mean, if our government's doing all of these horrible atrocities right now, and then even if you look at what they're starting to implement here in the United States, no, absolutely, I don't trust them. Yeah. No.
So Wally, I want to make sure that our audience can support the work you're doing. So please let them know where they can find your work, and if they can support your efforts in this, effort to sanction these settlers.
Yeah, you could find me everywhere on Wally Rashid. So just WAL, just my name, my first and last name. I'm on YouTube, and you can support me there. And then also, if you want to check out your politician's voting record on Israel, go to votelog.org. It's a website I built a few months ago, so you can check your entire politician's voting record there. Otherwise, yeah, that's about it. Thank you, Anna.
Incredible. Thank you for the work you're doing, Wally, and keep in touch.
Thank you. Take care.
Of course. All right, everybody, we're going to take our break. I'll read some comments in our social break. And when we come back, we'll get to that documentary that features never before seen footage of Lindsey Graham salivating over getting innocent people killed. We'll be right back. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to our social break. We've had a lot of interviews today, so it's been difficult to read your comments. I'm going to do my best to read as many as I can right now. We've got Cloti3241 in our super chats. Ukraine is developing its own PAC missiles for Patriot systems because they know Western supplies are limited. They are adapting their defense industry because they cannot rely on foreign deliveries. This is already happening. Countries face retaliation for supporting allies in war. The question is not whether risks exist, but whether Ukraine must ignore enemy supply chains while fighting for survival. Fair enough. I mean, we'll see how this plays out. I would prefer Ukraine to not deal with strikes coming from Iran. That's what I would prefer. But if you are confident that they have the military technology and the interceptors necessary to defend themselves from those types of strikes, all right, we'll see how it plays out. I, on the other hand, am very worried. Let's go to Seventh Fire Stephanie. Thank you so much for the generous super chat. Same atrocity with our First Nations. Unwelcomed and violent trespassers are not settlers, they are invaders. In the same way the Israeli government refers to Palestinians as terrorists was the same way white Europeans referred to tribes as savages. You were right about that. Different era, but same scenario. It's a land grab and it's genocide. You're right. And that perspective is really important to remember. Let's get back to the show. Welcome back to the show, everybody. Anna Kasparian with you. Before we get to the clips of Lindsey Graham that I promised, just a few more super chats. I want to go to Box, who says that Andrew Callahan of Channel 5 did a great short documentary in Palestine. There are 2 parts out so far. I highly recommend it. Box, I highly recommend it as well. I'm sorry, he does a great job. He's a fantastic reporter. He's young, he gets it. He understands the nuances of every conflict or story he covers. He's fair to all sides, but doesn't provide cover for wrongdoing. I just think he's fantastic. I'm really impressed with the work he does. So thank you for reminding me of that, because I did watch the video he put out, and I think it would be a great idea for our audience to take a look as well when they have time. Not right now. You're watching us right now. And we've also got Nick Mon, who says, so nice to see Wally on TYT. I've been so worried about his family after this weekend. I may not know him personally, but it's clear he's such a caring, intelligent guy who just wants his family safe. He is one of the few things in life that prevents me from just being fully black-pilled, because I need reminders of good humans, okay? Wonderful people who want to do good things. And he really dedicates himself to this cause and is a strategic thinker. And I really do hope his family is okay. It's just, I don't know what I would do with myself if I was in his position. Anyway, let's move on. Let's talk a little bit about this.
Virtually everything they have has been knocked out now. Their missile count is going way down. Amazingly, they're hitting countries that
Look what we've done here. I know. I almost cried. Yeah. I mean, like, how long have we been pushing this?
That was the late Senator Lindsey Graham celebrating that the United States had entered a war against Iran, something that he had been pushing for quite some time, something that he clearly, creamed himself over as soon as it happened. But his excitement was short-lived because now he's dead. But anyway, if you're wondering where that footage came from, documentary filmmaker Alex Holder apparently started working on a film about Lindsey Graham back in 2023, but then he died. And so now in the wake of Graham's death, Holder is releasing some footage, never before seen footage of the documentary. So you just watched a small clip. There's a lot more. Let's get to the next one.
Well, I mean, you've been pushing this for years, right? Right, it's here. I talked to Trump this morning. It's literally. Oh, he's Jack. Yeah. It's the best thing I've ever done. He loves blowing stuff up. So, there are a lot of people inside didn't want to do it. So I've had my challenges. But President Trump, when he gets into the zone, he listens, he asks good questions, no tweeting. He has done nothing, he hasn't tweeted much at all, no drama. He's been a great wartime president. I said last night that Trump and Bibi are like Roosevelt and Churchill. I mean, they're the right two guys to confront this evil.
So when Lindsey Graham suddenly died, apparently he had some sort of cardiac issue. I just said good riddance because even though it's not nice to say mean things about people right after their death is announced, Lindsey Graham loved to celebrate death and destruction. That was his brand. So all I wanted to do was keep his legacy alive. Give him a little taste of what he put out into the world. Oh, Trump listened and he asked good questions. Really? He was persuaded by Netanyahu and the head of Mossad that a war against Iran would be a cakewalk. All you need to do is a decapitation strike and in, out, you're done. You'll be a hero, just like you were with Venezuela. But it didn't work out that way, right? Now, did he ask appropriate questions to make sure that he wasn't, being played for a fool? I don't believe he did. Because we are now stuck in a quagmire war against Iran. So in one of the most stunning revelations from, the clips that we've been able to see from this documentary and from, the Wall Street Journal also reporting on it is that even Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu thought Graham was too much of a warmonger. So let that sink in for a second. The guy who has dragged us into now multiple wars in the Middle East on Israel's behalf, by the way, and is now fear-mongering about additional countries that he would like the United States to attack. That guy looked at Lindsey Graham and said, man, that guy is a warmonger. But Netanyahu did, so in early March, Graham wanted to goad Trump into joining Israel's strikes against southern Lebanon. But Netanyahu, of all people, didn't think that was such a good idea. Here's the clip.
Hey, baby, Lindsey.
Hey, Lindsey. How are you?
I'm just so impressed. Glad to be your friend.
I'm glad you are my friend.
I'm going to meet with the president this weekend. I'm going down to Doral. I'm going to try to get him to join with y'all in Lebanon, to maybe fly some with you. Would you like that?
Yeah, I get that. I think you have a point, but I've been thinking about the other side of it for a second. We're concentrating right now on Iran. If we tell Hezbollah that we're going all the way, we threaten them, but if we actually do it, then they have no reason not to go all the way against us. And right now, that's not our interest. We can do it later.
Well, that's actually good counsel. I'll put it out there as an idea. We can always go back to it.
So understand that in the mind of Netanyahu, of course he would want the United States to start attacking southern Lebanon on behalf of Israel. But Israel also knows, Netanyahu also knows, well, we don't really have the ability to defend ourselves against both Hezbollah and Iran at the same time. I mean, they did for a period of time after the US launched the war on February 28th. But what Graham wanted to do was essentially start getting the US involved. I mean, think about just, it's become so normalized that even I have to really stop and recognize how absurd this is. But you had a sitting United States senator discussing with the prime minister of a foreign country how he believes our military should start carrying out attacks and strikes against Hezbollah in South Lebanon without the Israelis even asking us for it. Lindsey Graham did not care at all about his own constituents. He didn't care about our country. He didn't care about our service members who have been killed in wars that have been fought on behalf of Israel. The real question is, like, why did Lindsey Graham have this like crazy obsession and love affair with Israel? Like so much so that he was willing to throw his own country under the bus, his own military under the bus on behalf of that foreign country. Like, was it blackmail? I mean, corruption, sure, you can point to that, but most of our politicians are corrupt. Most of our politicians take money from the Israel lobby. But even if you have most of our politicians supporting Israel's desires, they're not as zealous as Lindsey Graham was. And so the real question is why? So allegedly Graham agreed to doing this documentary. Remember, it's a documentary about him because he wanted to ensure that people had a better idea of his work in the Senate. Oh, we know about your work in the Senate. And he also wanted to motivate other Americans to run for office. The thing is, the types of Americans that we would want to be public servants are not the same as those Lindsey Graham is pushing for. Graham complained to the documentary crew that members of the Trump administration and even Trump himself were not hawkish enough for his liking. Good riddance. Yeah, good riddance. He wasn't killed by anyone, okay? He died of natural causes and he was in his 70s. Good riddance. At one point, Graham describes battling with a lot of people inside who didn't want Trump to venture into a war with Iran. Gee, I wonder why, Lindsey. I wonder why they didn't want that. Could it be that we'd get stuck in a quagmire? At another point, he expresses dismay that Republicans aren't doing enough to back the war. Yeah, because it's a deeply unpopular one. And Republican lawmakers are probably worried that there will be political retaliation if they are too overt in their support for a war that has done a lot of damage to our standing as the United States in the international community. A war that has led to Iran now controlling the Strait of Hormuz when previously cargo ships were free to transit to and fro without any worry, without any toll, without any attack. Graham states very few people are selling this war from the administration. I'm shocked. Maybe that shock was real heartbreaking for Senator Graham. The footage also shows Graham's occasional frustration with Trump, particularly for signing a preliminary deal with Iran in June. The project's final interview was in June, weeks before his death. Graham then says even Trump is growing too wobbly on the war. Okay, so let me give you his statement. He said, he's letting this thing slip away. I got to go talk to him. For our older viewers, I don't want you to take this personally because I'm sure you're wonderful people, okay? But there are people of a certain generation. They know they don't have that much time left. And they don't give a damn about the future of this country because they're not going to experience it. We are. So Lindsey Graham, who's like in his 70s and doesn't have to deal with the long-term repercussions of starting these wars, entering these wars, fighting these wars on behalf of Israel, is happy to do it. Who cares about the global economy? I'm gonna die soon. I mean, he didn't know he was gonna die soon, but he's of a certain age. So the makeup of the power balance or whatever on the international stage doesn't matter to him. The global economy doesn't matter to him. The long-term impact on the United States doesn't matter to him because he's not going to witness or experience it himself. Lindsey Graham caused a lot of damage for our country. And then he died and didn't have to suffer the consequences of it in this life. But there's more. Per the documentary, Graham was in high demand with foreign governments, which is not shocking to me at all. Graham told Holder how bizarre he thought it was that a senator from South Carolina has a closer relationship with the Saudi Arabian leader, that's Mohammed bin Salman, than anyone in a Democratic or Republican administration. Lindsey Graham was a treacherous, disgusting traitor to the United States. Good riddance, there's more. Holder traveled with Graham for a meeting with Israeli officials and the Mossad, Israel's intelligence agency, as they prepared for the Iran conflict. Holder, remember, Holder is the filmmaker here, likened Graham's treatment there to how a prime minister or king would be treated. So understand, people like Lindsey Graham were just in the United States to like serve as operatives on behalf of Israel, because he didn't care about this country at all, at all. There's a reason why he was treated like a king in Israel and not treated that way here in the United States. Were his own constituents treating him like a king? Could it be that maybe Lindsey Graham's actions in the Senate didn't in any way benefit the life of the people of his own state? Graham was also in high demand with American media. We could do a media show every 2 seconds, Graham said about the Iran war, asking his press secretary if he had ever been so in demand. But despite all of Graham's power and access, he still was catastrophically wrong when it came to his assessment of the Iran war. I mean, anyone who denies that is just delusional. In March, here's what he said. In 3 to 4 weeks, we're going to have them, meaning the Iranians, in a spot where they start losing control of some cities. Get the Arabs more openly involved tomorrow, and then have almost irreversible momentum. Did it work out that way? Didn't work out that way, did it? And we're all suffering the consequences of that. But as we all know by now, look, not only did that not come to fruition, it does raise a question, okay? How could someone so deeply uninformed become such an influential figure? Because it's not just Lindsey Graham. I think that this is a trend within our government. And it's probably because he was acting on behalf of wealthy donors like Miriam and Sheldon Adelson, her now dead husband. Speaking of Miriam, she did put out a statement following Lindsey Graham's death. And it's amazing how they just say the quiet parts out loud all the time, all day, every day. Take a look.
We were very close friends of Lindsey. Sheldon, we met him in 1990, approximately. There was a mission of AIPAC, and we took freshman congressmen, Republican, to Israel. So we and Sheldon and me and another 2 partners of Sheldon paid for the trip, donated it to AIPAC educational group, something like that. And then we met Lindsey. And I want to tell you, I, as a physician, I love to see the brain. I mean, and the eyes are our brain. And they were so pure and blue. And I mean, you could see what he's thinking about. He was so honest, with integrity. And Sheldon and me fell in love with him. And the relationship continued for years.
Good riddance. We'll be right back. All right, Palestinian American for Liberation writes in and says, #1 ranking, the most hated country has become most democratic state in country is Zionist Israel. So there was a poll done of the international community, and Israel is the #1 most hated country on the international stage, which doesn't really surprise me much. Much worse though, the United States has become 6th, especially under the Trump administration, Also, did you hear the Department of Homeland Security high-ranking officials have resigned? They acknowledge that Trump administration are crossing the line against immigrants and the cruelty is insane. Yeah, an ICE official who had a very violent past killed an American citizen. In fact, Tom Homan went on national television, and you know how Tom Homan is. I mean, he loves the mass deportation plans and all of that. He is no dove when it comes to immigration. Immigration enforcement, I should be very specific. He even came out and said, like, that guy shouldn't have been hired. When the administration is being criticized by the likes of Tom Homan, I mean, what else is there to say? So thank you for bringing that story up. It's just infuriating. I mean, our government is at war with its people. I think that's pretty clear right now. Basket Case Robbins in our X community, because we are streaming on X now, says, beautiful, truthful queen. Thank you. I appreciate that. All right, let me see if I can fit in one more comment. I'm out of time. I'll read more later. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the show, and welcome to Harold Finch, who is a new TYT member. In our members only bonus episode today, we're going to dive into an interview that Naftali Bennett did in Israel. He is trying to become the next prime minister of Israel, and homeboy keeps listing new countries that he wants the US to go to war with on Israel's behalf. I want to share the latest with you. So members, you can definitely check that out right after the main show. If you're not a member, tyt.com/join to become one, or you can just hit that join button if you're watching us live. Also, for those of you who are subscribed to our YouTube channel and you're not getting notifications when we upload new content, the reason why that's happening is because you didn't ring the bell. It's annoying that that's even a feature, but it's a feature on YouTube. And so all you gotta do is click that little bell icon, and that way you will begin getting notifications every time we upload new content. Okay, let's get to the ongoing Epstein cover up, because it's not over yet.
I ran around New York City as a child, trying to get an STD to kill a pedophile because I didn't believe the government would ever stop him. That wasn't my job to stop him.
You just heard from one of the Epstein survivors. Her name is Rosa Gillis, and she's a former model who was abused by Epstein and others who engaged in taking advantage of young women and girls who were being trafficked by Epstein. So sadly, she was failed by our Justice Department, and they're still failing her today, along with the victims trying to seek justice in the Epstein scandal. And one of the central figures in screwing these survivors over is Todd Blanche. So as Todd Blanche is said to be confirmed as the next US Attorney General, what a disaster. The thousands of women who were teens at the time of their abuse are now sounding the alarm and just kind of warning Congress, the Senate in particular, against confirming Todd Blanche as the next Attorney General. So Senator Tom Tillis, who of course is the Senate Majority Leader, has asked Todd Blanche to maybe try to make things right with these survivors. Maybe reach out, have a sit down with them, a substantive meeting with survivors in order to win over Tillis's vote. Now, the meeting actually did happen, but it was anything but substantive. That's not according to me, that's according to the survivors who said that they received an hour of deflection, interruption, and gaslighting from Todd Blanche. So let's actually hear more from the survivors themselves. This next person you're gonna hear from is Liz Stein, who sat down with PBS News to talk about the meeting itself.
We went into the meeting really in earnest, looking to work with Todd Blanche in the Department of Justice. We went into the meeting with an agenda, questions that we had that we wanted answered. And when we got into the meeting, we didn't receive any answers to any of the questions that we were asking. He talked around the subjects that we were trying to press him on, and we couldn't really get him to commit to anything. I think that if Todd Blanche even offered us the slightest bit of an olive branch, we would have been satisfied with that, but it just felt like more of the same over and over again. You know, earlier this year when Pam Bondi testified and refused to acknowledge that we were in the room, that sent a really strong message to us about what the DOJ thinks of us as victims of crime, and our meeting with Blanche only reiterated those feelings for me.
Our government does not respect the people of the United States. They have no interest in protecting the people of the United States. They have no interest in serving the people of the United States. And anyone who has participated in efforts to prevent justice from being served in the Epstein scandal, okay, should be considered an enemy of the United States, because they're far more interested in protecting pedophiles than ensuring that justice is served on behalf of the survivors here. Journalist Tara Palmieri, friend of the show, who actually wrote about the details of the meeting for her Substack, reported the following. She said, according to multiple people present, Blanche repeatedly stressed that many of the failures surrounding the Epstein investigation were not his fault. Wow, real leader there, passing the buck. He was not in charge of the DOJ, and so if they had complaints, they were not his to address. Instead, Blanche directed survivors back to the FBI, an agency that, if Blanche is confirmed by the Senate, will fall under his official control, and that remains within his unofficial control now acting Attorney General. So, do you guys remember what Todd Blanche did early on in Trump's second term? He decided to pay Ghislaine Maxwell a little visit. We don't know the details about what they discussed, but we do know that immediately afterward, Ghislaine Maxwell was moved to Club Fed, a low security prison where she gets to play with puppies. She gets to order takeout. She is treated with kids' gloves, even though she is a rapist and a trafficker of women and girls. She's disgusting. And she belongs in a far worse facility. Let's just leave it at that. But Todd Blanche, did that for her. Who knows what kind of quid pro quo situation that was, considering the fact that Todd Blanche was Trump's personal lawyer at one point. But man, looks like Trump's got something to hide, doesn't it? But oddly enough, Blanche did acknowledge that the FBI, they haven't handled the case well. Isn't he so kind to make a concession like that? But when survivors pressed him to characterize those failures as negligence or commit to reopening investigations, Blanche stopped short because he's in the pedophile protection racket. That's what Blanche is interested in. These people are sick, man. So he wouldn't make any commitments. He offered no apology for failing to protect Epstein survivors or ensure that they would receive justice, especially when it came to, the unredacted names in the Epstein files that were released. Remember how they went through quite a bit of pain to make sure they redacted the names of the rapists, but they left the names of the survivors unredacted? So Blanche still has to face the Senate, the full Senate, for a confirmation hearing. But if confirmed, civil rights lawyer Ron Kuby told The Guardian that it means that no other perpetrators will be held criminally liable for their misconduct. That's no different from the way it's been throughout the Trump administration and the Biden administration. All the millionaires and billionaires and hangers-on and others in Epstein's orbit who, enabled him have not been brought to justice, and they're not going to be. Which brings us back to Rosa Gillis, who was the 18-year-old model from Uzbekistan when she unfortunately crossed paths with Epstein. She met Epstein back in 2008 while modeling for a modeling agency known as MC2, and soon became Epstein's secretary after it was revealed that she was drowning in debt from her agency. So this agency is super sus. Okay, let's just put it that way. But no one should start off a career for any company or agency with the company or agency putting them in debt to begin with. But that's what happened. And then she becomes, an indentured servant. And how do you think that plays out when she is introduced to Epstein? Well, she's about to explain in the next clip. Take a look.
What I was told, all I do is pick up the phone and say, Florida Science Foundation, may I help you?
Unbeknownst to Rosa, Epstein had just pled guilty in Florida to soliciting prostitution from a minor. He was serving jail time on a work release program. The first weekend at Epstein's office, Rosa was asked by another woman to massage Epstein's feet.
He gives me his foot, and I'm looking at his foot, and it has an ankle monitor on. But to me, what it looks like, he has a plastic thing wrapped around his foot with a black box on it with a blinking light, right? And I go, what is this? And he flips around and he goes, take off your shirt. I froze. And the woman comes over and starts unbuttoning my blouse. She takes it off. Then she takes off my bra. And then she walks out. I sat in that room, staring at the bottle of a Fiji water while a man was groping me and masturbating. And then when he was done, he stood up and he left.
She maintains that Epstein abused her every weekend after that. And she also says that there were many people who knew, but no one did anything to protect her. Take a look.
She is still haunted by an encounter she had one morning at Epstein's mansion with a man in uniform, someone she thought was a sheriff.
I thought to myself, thank you. This is going to be the day that this all stops. Followed, the sheriff walked in, Jeffrey. They giggled, they laughed together, they buddied it up. I just stood in the kitchen looking at this sheriff, thinking to myself, at some point, he's gonna turn to me and be like, who are you? And he walked out.
Didn't say anything to you?
Nothing. And then I figured it all out. He's currently serving his sentence while he's doing the same thing to everybody. And nobody's there to help us. He was wearing an ankle monitor. He didn't stop what he was doing while convicted. He was doing the same thing.
So after Jeffrey Epstein got that sweetheart deal and was allowed to leave prison during his sentence for sex trafficking, and then come back, report back at night, he was out and about committing more of these assaults on young women and girls. Not a single person other than Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell have faced charges for roles related to Gillis's abuse, and thousands of others. Jean-Luc Burnell, who actually founded the modeling agency that Gillis was part of, MC2. Well, Burnell signed Gillis and was found dead in a French jail cell back in 2022 and will never face a trial. And more recently, Daniel Syed, another French modeling scout who helped arrange meetings with Epstein, was also found dead in his home in France. Not suspicious at all. Not suspicious at all. By the way, the only reason why we know about Gillis is because when the Department of Justice released what few files they were willing to release of the Epstein files, only half of them from what's been reported, they didn't redact her name. She didn't want to be known. She didn't want to go public with what had happened to her, but they didn't redact her name in the Epstein files. And she's furious. I would be furious. However, she has used this as an opportunity to talk to the press and share her story and talk about what happened to her. And that takes a tremendous amount of strength. And I'm grateful that she's doing it because it's giving us more insight into just how deep this cover up really is, into just how little our government cares about protecting young women and girls from billionaire rapists who are tied to foreign countries. We need to accept the fact that our government is at war against its own people. And what are we going to do about it? Because I don't want to live under that type of government. I don't want to pay that government taxes, and I don't trust them to do anything good for me. That's where I'm at, and it's not a great place to be. Anyway, members only bonus episode is next. We're going to talk about Naftali Bennett's latest comments and warmongering, and we should pay attention because that'll be our next president. Prime Minister of Israel ends up being the president of the United States. That's the reality. So tyt.com/join to watch, and we'll see you there.